is about public transport. The state of public transport in the Burnham-on-Sea area is terrible. If you work in Weston, which a lot of us do, the summer timetable is slightly better, but the last bus back in winter is awful at 5:50 p.m. If you need the morning bus, the first one out is at 7:52, which is ridiculous if you start work. Candidates, perhaps you could give us some thoughts on public transport and its funding.
James hasn't been on a committee for that. No, I haven't. You'll be all right.
No, I was going to ask James to speak first, as he hasn't spoken first on the question yet.
I take the hint and make this quite concise. Look, I mean, the 20 and the 21 are commercially viable services, which is great. That's better than many routes around the constituency. We've had some success on the 21 to get the summer timetable extended forward into April and crucially later through to the end of October half term, because there were real problems last year where the winter season, the winter timetable kicked in whilst the camps up in Green were still full, and that was leading to buses running very late and being very overcrowded. However, we lost the 67th, we lost the 102, and actually sort of in the 3-4 years before that, we've lost more buses besides. That means that a number of people have been cut off, and it also means that a number of places that were built under the assumption that they would be served by a bus, like the Burnham Medical Centre, is no longer served by a bus. That's clearly unworkable. The County Council's view is that the community transport network can plug the gap, but I have been representing the views of a number of residents who live around the sort of Stoddens Road loop pretty regularly over the last year. Ditto for people who live in Barrow, Brent Knoll, East Brent. The reality is that the community transport network can't cover it, because if you get a doctor's appointment, you tend not to be able to book your transport far enough in advance for the community transport system to work. What do we do? Well, an answer is more subsidy for the bus network, but as things stand at the moment, there isn't the money in the county council coffers to do that. That may improve when we get them a fairer funding deal, and crucially, once the retention of business rates come in. But I'm also very interested in stuff that was in the buses bill. It got timed out by the end of the last Parliament. I hope that it will be brought back, because I think there's some interesting stuff in that. And I think there is lots that we can learn from the 3 total transport trials that have been happening around the country, where we've looked at all the different types of taxpayer-funded transport, patient transport, school transport, subsidised public transport, and other things beside, and seen how you can find synergies in order to extend the network by using one vehicle instead of 4 or 5.
Thank you. And now can we move on to Tessa?
I think public transport is a really serious problem, because it's the way that all of us get connected, and I find it's a very odd thing, because government is fantastically urban-centric. It's absolutely obsessed with joining cities to cities. And it does wonderfully generous things, like giving people free bus passes. But if there's no bus to use your bus pass on, it's absolutely no good. And I think we also forget the fact that actually young people have to be in some sort of either study, whether they're at school or at college, or in an apprenticeship or whatever. And they're very often either unpaid or paid incredibly low amounts of money to do that kind of work or training, and yet they have to pay full bus fares. The other thing is, of course, there are a number of people who live in this area who need to access services which are only in Bridgewater. If you don't have access to a computer and you need to turn up to the job centre, that's quite difficult at times if you don't live right in the centre of everything. And I think we need to really have a proper review. There are people who specialise in all of this stuff. I've met a number of people who specialise in bus timetables and all the rest of it, and they'll tell you that quite often the County Council has actually commissioned services where you've got 2 different providers on a particular route, so you buy your ticket to Taunton going one way, and when you produce your return ticket on the bus on the way back, they say, oh no, that's not our company, so you have to buy another ticket to come back again. There are people who can't get to work, there are people who can't enjoy the other tourism aspects of this county if they can't get somewhere by bus. A lot of people who go up to Burnham are not in possession of a car, and they're reliant entirely on public transport, and if they want to get across the county to see some of the other things like Glastonbury Tor, or to go to Wookhill Caves or Cheddar or wherever, it's actually fantastically difficult. So I think we really need to make sure that actually all of our transport is integrated properly, that school transport is used in a different way. I think we have very often situations where buses are provided at the wrong times of day, and I mean, somebody's already quoted that time of a bus that finishes at 5 o'clock or 5:50 in the afternoon. That's just not good enough. If you don't work, if you don't finish work until after that time, it's utterly useless. So I think probably government needs to have somebody who's going to jump up and down about this and try and make sure that they understand what it's like in rural areas. And I count Burnham as a rural area. We're a coastal town, and it's we get missed out quite often. So I think it's about making sure that we do use the community transport network in different ways. That's being done in Bristol. Hackney Community Transport is running buses in Bristol, and they're doing it at no profit, and the surplus is used to make more accessible buses. So the platform goes down so that people who do have a wheelchair or a pushchair can get onto the bus and use the service. So I think there are options there, but we need to use people who are specialists, and there's very often people in the community who know a lot about buses. So thank you.
Andy.
Isn't this a nonsense? The last question was about climate change. And the next question is buses. And we haven't got any. Certainly the policy seems to be that you're going to give everyone a bus pass and then take away all of the buses. So you've got people who have to drive cars. There's cars and motorbikes and vans all over the place, actually adding to the problem of climate change. And we're not looking at things in a holistic way at all. The good news from Labour is, and this gets a cheer generally, is we're going to renationalise the rail system. And about time is what I can say. Everyone will have personal experiences, and I don't want to go on as long as James did on climate change with my own personal experiences of transport. But another one I can tell you is that when I wanted to look at working in Taunton, so I was thinking, well, okay, so maybe I'll cycle to the one station in the constituency, and I'll get down to Taunton, and I'll come back. And I thought, well, I should be leaving about 5:30 from Taunton. And I checked the timetable 2 or 3 times, and thought I should be able to read the timetable. I'm a teacher, and I get kids to do that. And the train didn't stop at Highbridge. It stopped every single other stop on the way to Bristol. It seemed to manage to stop 3 times in North Somerset, 3 times in World. I only thought there were 2 stations in Western-super-Mare and World, but no, there's another one. And it didn't even stop in Highbridge. And that is when you're expanding the town and you're cutting transport. Absolute nonsense. We need much, much better transport, and it is a basic requirement. Young people really struggle. They're in places where they don't have communication, there's no signal. And they need access to transport because they need access to part-time jobs as well as getting to school or to college. And it is a basic, and it needs to be put in place. Integrated is the word. I'm just thinking quickly another one of a brilliant idea of having buses coming in from Wells and Weston into Cheddar with the bus once a week that was going to Bristol. So the bus company is saying, oh, it's not being used, so we're going to cut it. So people tried to get to Cheddar to get the bus, but guess what? The bus left 5 minutes before their buses from Wells and Weston arrived. Good planning.
Lorna.
I can't understand. Is it?
We can hear you.
Yeah. I can't understand why we in this country have a problem with buses. Thank you. Yeah. And then allow Google and other big companies to get away without paying tax. In fact, it makes me feel quite angry that we should have got ourselves into this position of where the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. And I feel this is a very unequal, unfair society that we're living in, and is part of the reason why I'm taking the trouble and time to actually stand to say it is not good enough. Of course we should have buses, and who were the people who invented the railway system? So we need to really have a good hard think about where this country is going, what it's doing and what its priorities are. And certainly companies who come in and make money and don't pay taxes, this surely has to be addressed so that money can be poured back into this country and so that we can have a proper bus system. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I've had a number of questions posed about